Let everybody get on.
TikTok.
Do we have the folks online here that I can see? Okay.
Long and short with Nick, it was a good call.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. You feel better?
The battery's coming. Yeah.
Good. Because
And there was something there though.
yeah, you sniffed it. You sniffed it for sure. So anyway,
I get started.
okay. Guys, I'm going to go ahead and dive in. Hello. Nice to see everybody. We've got a good group online here and certainly excited for the training. I'm Scott. I have somebody here. Who is that guy with those weird eyes, man? I love it. Hey, listen, we have fun and we don't take ourselves too seriously all the time, as you can see. But I've got Mike with me here, and Danny's behind the camera helping out, and we're excited to be here with you guys. So I've got a lot I want to cover today. It's going to be very much specific to seller scripting, some of the issues that we are seeing happening in some of the other markets that we're working in, and I also can tell you this, that we're big believers in making the script yours. We have always preached that. We believe that if you sound like you're reading a script, then it's probably going to come across like that. So in the spirit of encouraging people to make it their own, including Jeff here in our office at corporate, we've gotten a series of different versions of it, which has been really great at its core, but I think it's lent itself to maybe some confusion and what chronology to say certain types of things. So over the past week or so, Mike and I have tweaked the script, laid it out one more time. It's all the same verbiage. Let me be very clear about that. But we've laid it out in what we believe is a very concise, easy to follow, and frankly, educational and informative way or sequence that the sellers can ultimately understand clearly. I'm going to go through that today. About 10 minutes ago, Danny had sent that out to you guys, so it should be in your inboxes. If you haven't seen it yet, take a look at your inbox. It should be there, and we are going to go through it. We're going to kind of dissect it a little bit more, and I've got a couple other things I want to cover. And let me just tell you very quickly the impetus of why we want to go through the script. What we find is when people come here, it's very much like drinking from a fire hose. You get a lot of information thrown at you from the first minute you're here, and literally doesn't stop until you leave, and we expect you to go home and retain it all and put it in play immediately. Well, the reality is nobody retains 100%. In fact, it's really a minority of the information you're retaining. So what we are finding are there are a few different things that people are doing that are incorrect when it comes to not only pricing the home, from not only your strike price with your seller, but your go-to-market price, which is what you would have as your markup and creating your profit margin. But I spoke with a gentleman who I won't name, but recently, and he's a new affiliate of ours, and he just has a great energy, great charisma, not scared of the phone, and just really a neat guy. And but he was having some challenges with some of the responses from sellers. So I said, let's role play. Let's walk through the script and let me hear what you're saying exactly, and let me see if I can't find some identifiers that may be hindrances to you getting the contracts that you should be getting based on the number of people you're calling. We literally spent 45 minutes and didn't get past the first 3 or 4 sentences. Now, that's not a slant on him, but it was very much an eye-opener for myself and others here that I share the call with, in that sometimes the smallest details can potentially side rail a good contract. So in that discovery, it realized again that sometimes it's important to just go back to the basics and cover those things that are the foundation of what we do here. So we're going to get into that in great detail here, and I've got a couple other things I want to share with you. So first of all, a couple quick housekeeping items. We're going to start having these every 2 weeks. The next session, we're going to be focusing specifically on marketing. Now, I did talk to someone, I think 2 days ago, and they were asking about some marketing. Danny has put together a report on Facebook, and I got to tell you, it's been phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal. In fact, we have one of our affiliates in North Carolina. Is Leo on, by the way, Danny? Whether he's not, it doesn't matter, but they wrote a couple deals just this week based on a Facebook ad that was put out with Danny's help and really direction just this past weekend. Last weekend we had a Facebook ad that generated a tremendous amount of calls. So Obviously, the basics that we teach and train you are important, signs and ads on Craigslist and Zillow and controlling Zillow and things of that nature. But the Facebook report that Danny put together and a video that he did recently walking someone through it, we're going to send that out to you. But it's had really significant results instantaneously. So that's really exciting, and it's not something that's new necessarily. We've put Facebook ads out in the past, but the immediate impact has been pretty exciting. So we're going to send that report out to you, send out the training video as well, and then in 2 weeks from today, Danny's going to spearhead this training and walk through that with you. Obviously, questions in the interim, please direct them back here, but it's really been a neat marketing tool for us in the recent weeks, and it's had some immediate effects as well. So. Okay, one other thing I want to share is that we have created a few different brochures. Have them right here for you. We have one for seller and we have one for buyer. And within the brochures and the, I guess, essence of them, we really design these for using as a tool for when you are meeting with a seller or buyer. What we found is that, again, back to the retention thing, you understand as a whole what we do and how we do it and could recite it, certainly. But we don't want you to forget some of the key points that are selling features and some of the key things that people really want to hear and that really are essential to hear. So the benefits of selling is one, you open it up, and by the way, we do have this available for you. The only real change is just going to be your phone number in the back, but we walk through why sellers work with us, why sellers, this is a good option for them, and frankly, as you all know, it's really economic. We also have the 12 highlights that we always talk about, making sure that you convey to the seller one way, shape, or form. So rather than having to remember them all, or rather than even having them in front of you as if you're reading them, we've created a brochure, really nice stock, and I think it turned out really well. That really speaks for you and really can be used as a outline and template for when you're sitting in someone's living room. So we have one for the seller. Mike, you want to add to
I
that?
was just going to say, even on top of that, that'd be a great piece to really occupy them while you're giving yourself the tour.
Absolutely.
So hand
You
that
know
to
what?
them when you walk in.
Great
give yourself
point.
The tour, and they're
It's a great point. So when you walk in, and one of the things that we teach, and I'll share it again because it's important, that I've learned this the hard way many times, when you walk into someone's home and they say, and you ask them to give you a tour of the house, be careful because you may be there for an hour and a half. What I always say is, listen, you mind if I take a quick peek through the home? Anybody sleeping or naked? And they always laugh because it's meant to be funny and really have some brevity to the situation. But that allows you to walk through the home. Again, it's a widget, guys. You want to make sure that there are no things that stand out in a negative way, but at the end of the day, you'll get pictures and you'll have a chance to really look through the house and the specifics after you've gotten the contract. So you just want to take a cursory look through the house and ultimately sit down at the kitchen table and kind of review things once again. We always want to reiterate the program, the merits, and certainly the metrics we look for in that continuous repetition from the very first call that Crystal or Carol here make to the follow-up call, and then certainly when you're in their home, you're repeating the same thing over and over. It's encompassed in the email, it's encompassed in the scripts, etc. Now you walk in, you hand them this brochure, as Mike suggests, and now they have a moment to look through it. Again, they're going to read the reiterated points in the brochure while you take a tour, and you sit down. In many ways, the stage is already set for you because you've given them a chance to read through it. So, and of course, the buyers, it's the same thing. Maybe a little different timing. You'd want them to walk through the home at first, although you could always let them carry the brochure with them. That's more semantics than anything. But this is also designed to really point out all the highlights for the buyers, why buying with us is a great way to buy a home, and what we really look for in our buyers, kind of the qualifying factors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've also put down what we call a cut sheet, and it really just is an expense sheet. This is just two sides, nice thick stock paper, has kind of our mission statement on the back, but it really has the closing, all the costs associated. And we always believe in full disclosure and full transparency right up front. And something like this is, again, a tool for you to use. It clearly maps out what it costs to buy a home with us and other correlating expenses. And again, it's designed to be a tool for you guys. So we have those available, ready for you. Send us a note, and Danny will get you the artwork, and you can get them at Vistaprint or anywhere with your phone number on them. Danny will show you or tell you how to change those, but they're really, really great tools, and we hope that they work for you guys. So I want to share that as well. And before we dive into the script, we had a couple of things that we've kind of run into recently. In fact, we've had 2 deals recently, actually I think 3 deals recently with our affiliates where we have failed to really insert a profit margin. And so we have a couple of phrases that we use here, one of which is called the strike price. So you go to a home, the seller is asking, let's just say for easy math, $100,000. We are going to ask that magical question that we have in our script, which we will get to in a second here, but that is, Mr. Seller, if the terms as a whole are right, the buyer's a good fit, what's the least you can take on the home and still be comfortable? Now, or still be happy is a word we like to use. Now that's really an eyeball question. We want you to ask that really when you're getting ready to write the contract, not so much when you're on the phone. When you're on the phone and you're dealing with sellers, the intent is to get the appointment. So you want to say everything you can to get to the appointment, not things that are going to ultimately negate the appointment or have the potential to negate the appointment. Negotiating a price on a home you've never seen certainly could lend itself to be one of those items that we would not want you to say over a phone call, but really when you're sitting in someone's living room. And depending, when you become more proficient, and like Jeff here at the office, you don't want to get in your car until you know you're getting the contract, you may insert that question in the script at some point, but it is not going to be part of your initial dialogue. It's really going to be designed for the kitchen table. The hope is that they are asking 100. We know that 10 out of 10 sellers always listed a little high with the intent to take an offer. It's our hope that they'll come off of the 100 ask price down to say 90, understand that you're going to take it back to market with a profit margin inserted. If the seller is asking 100, we ask them what the least they could take and still be happy would be on the price, and they come to 90. Our strike price with the seller is 90. We then increase our profit, or the price of the home, which is ultimately going to be called our go-to-market price. Those two prices have to be different. You have to have a margin in there. You have to have a profit or a spread in there. If they're the same, so you put it under contract at 90, your strike price, and you take it to market at 90, we've got a problem. And it makes it really hard to carve out a spread and ultimately get a successful deal. And don't forget, part of our original script is telling the seller that we're going to have our price on top of theirs, so ideally it doesn't hurt their bottom line equity position. So I know it sounds simple, and it is, but in the context of a lot of training, it can be overlooked, and it has been overlooked a couple times in the past couple weeks, and it's made for some challenges in the deals. Now, we've been able up to this point to work through some of them, but I can tell you in the past we haven't always been able to work through, and certainly even if we can work through it with you and with your buyer and seller, most likely you're going to make less money because you didn't carve out a spread for yourself. So very, very important. You want to have a strike price and an increased go-to-market price. If it's under $500,000, it's $10,000 profit. If it's over $500,000, we'd like you to ask for $15,000 based on the price point and the perception of value. It's a big deal. We've talked about it quite a bit recently, even though it's a very basic tenet of what we do. Again, it's easy to lose sight of that in the context of making a lot of phone calls and dealing with buyers, sellers, different addresses, and the whole 9 yards. But you've got to have a strike price that should be negotiated with the seller and a go-to-market price that is higher than what your strike price is with the seller. Now, certainly you should do comps ahead of time. You want to make sure the seller is pricing the home correctly. There are a couple questions that we ask. Do you mind if I ask how you came up with your price? Remember, we're very soft. These are not hardline approaches or really pointed questions or pointed as far as how you ask them. Listen, do you mind if I ask how you came up with your price? Right? And one of the great equalizers is the appraisal question. And again, it is not in your script for the first call or the follow-up call, but it's really more of an eyeball question when you're at the kitchen table. Mr. Seller, as you know, the home won't have to appraise today based with our program, but it will have to appraise at some point in time in the near future, typically 6 to 12 months, maybe 18 depending on the buyer and their ability to walk into the bank and get a loan. At that time, the bank only is going to lend on appraised value. Just out of curiosity, if it had to appraise today, what do you think it might appraise for? Soft. But you're asking them to really put the merits of how they're pricing it on the line here. If someone says, you know, I have it priced at 100 or 120, but it would only appraise at 100, it's kind of a problem. Of course, you want to smile at that point because you're still trying to get the contract, but no one's going to buy a house that won't appraise. It's a very rare situation where someone will pay more than list price get a bank loan and pay the difference out of pocket. It just doesn't happen, and particularly in most of the markets that we're in. So you certainly want to make sure that you're asking those questions. At the time you're getting the contract, we still want you to get the contract, but if you have a house that is just overpriced, it's going to make for a very, very tough sell. You want to add to that at all? Okay, and Danny, I know we've talked a lot about strike pricing. Any comments on the strike price that I did not share?
Always think, how am I going to make money?
Yeah, I'll take it. Always think, how am I going to make money? And obviously, it's a foregone conclusion. We love what we do, and we're passionate about what we do. We're passionate about creating homeowners and hopefully making a small difference in people's lives. But we know we get out of bed in the morning for making money, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a four-letter word around here. We like to make money, and that's a driving factor. And I know everybody watching this has those same intentions. So you've got to figure out, how am I making money on this deal? But the bottom line, I will repeat it one more time, you have two prices in your file. We're big believers in whiteboards. We like visual. Sometimes visual can help, and for those who don't have a whiteboard, heck, you can get a real small one for 20 bucks at Walmart, maybe even less than that. But you've got to have the address of the home. The date you put it under contract is really important. You want to know when you first started marketing it, but you want to make sure that the price that you're looking at on your whiteboard is the go-to-market price. If you have your strike price on your whiteboard, not the go-to-market price, you could very easily, in the context of a busy day, overlook the two or the difference between the two and accidentally quote what your strike price is. So remember, you have a price with your seller, you need to have an increased price to your buyer and to the market. You also want to make sure that the seller has a home that is marketable with its price. You want to ask some very simple questions. Do you mind if I ask him to come with your price? And of course, that appraisal question should be asked if you feel it's overpriced, and that would again come at the kitchen table, not on the phone. If you get very proficient, or when you get proficient and you want to ask those on the phone, that would certainly be an individual decision, but we always encourage those, what we call tougher questions, and I'll quote them because I don't think they're tough, but they're a little bit more pointed. Those really should come at the kitchen table. It's a big enough deal where we wanted to really start this training out by saying that and sharing it. Again, happened 3 times in the past couple weeks. Not going to question the whys or wherefores. I just know that it's important that we share it and that we identify that while we are on this training here. So are you good on that, Michael? Okay. All right, very good. The other thing I want to say is this, and this is just a real quick point, but this came up on a phone call just a few days ago, and then I want to dive into the script here. The question had to do with a non-exclusive type agreement. So optimally, and that's certainly a key word, optimally, we always want a window of time where we have the exclusive ability to market the home. For obvious reasons. We don't want someone to pull the rug from underneath us or sell it from underneath us, maybe a better way to say it. So we always are going to ask for the seller to suspend their marketing for the time that we're involved. We typically ask for 90 days. If anyone balks at 90 days, your next question would be, would you consider giving us 60 days or 45 days or 30 days? I give an example in our training. We did a deal literally in 11 days. Now, we didn't write the contract in 11 days, but we were dealing with a seller who was a Navy guy. Jacksonville has 2 Navy bases. What's funny, or maybe not so funny, he was here I think 8 or 9 years and finally decided to go ahead and buy a home, and within a year or two he got transferred. So I guess that's just how it goes when you're in military. But didn't have much equity at all because of course he bought at a retail price and had only been in the home or owned it a year or two, so he was renting it out and didn't have the luxury of letting it sit vacant. So we reached out to him. Here's another tidbit: Craigslist for rent by owner. Craigslist for rent by owner, 200,000 and more, typically were homes that were not purchased for rental purposes. They were homes that were either lived in and or there was some reason that they are renting it and not selling it. Doesn't always mean they want to be a landlord, and those can be really, really good targets. We've had some success with those. So this particular gentleman didn't want to be a landlord from Texas, but he didn't have a choice, couldn't really sell it without taking a big check to closing. Didn't want to let it go to foreclosure, of course. I think it was his VA loan, his veterans loan, so you lose that one time, you could find yourself in a pickle. And I don't think you can use it again once you lose it. But further than that, he just wanted to try and have this hybrid, to try and have somebody in there making payments without having him be responsible for for it, and ultimately having an exit strategy at the end. So when we called him, he said, I love the program, love what you're doing, it's perfect for what I'm looking for, what would be a benefit to me, but I can't let it sit empty. I've got 3 people ready to go. I think it was May 1 and this was early April. He said, I can give you like 11 days. Now, I don't know where that came from, but that was his time frame. So at the time, the guy that was working with us said 11 days. I said, why not? What do we have to lose? We didn't even see the home. We sent him the contract over, scanned it in, sent it, he sent it back, and then we went and looked at it. And lo and behold, we did go to our buyers list, and it doesn't happen like this. In fact, rarely does it happen like this, but we went to our buyers list and we did find somebody that loved the home. And within those 11 days, we were able to write a contract. Didn't close it in 11 days, but closed it shortly after. And ultimately, it was a great deal that worked out for everybody. So if you can get even a small window of time of exclusivity, that's optimal. Now, once that window of time runs out, let's say you get 30 days. You don't have to stop marketing after 30 days. You just have to understand, and the seller does as well, that they will then start marketing in tandem with you. And again, as long as they're not looking to rent the home, or they're not fishing in the same pond you are, meaning they're not targeting lease purchase buyers, they're just simply targeting the traditional buyer. So they're fishing in this pool of traditional buyers over here, and we're fishing in this much bigger pool of non-traditional buyers over here. That's okay. That should be fine. That should not confuse the market. But if they're advertising for traditional and non-traditional, and you're advertising for non-traditional, you're going to confuse people, and frankly, it hurts more than it helps. So at the end of the day, if they won't give you any exclusivity, and that does happen, guys, people need to sell their home. They may or may not be distressed, but they may be motivated, and they have to sell. They want every line in the water possible. They certainly don't want to just pull their marketing, even if it's in good faith, and even if they like you a lot. They need to keep that line in the water because they have to cultivate a sale. It's a personal decision at that point whether or not you want to take the contract, knowing that you're going to be marketing in tandem with somebody. Now, again, if they're trying to rent it, nope, don't waste your time. That's an absolute no-no. We can't nor will we compete with the rental property. There's no commitment on rental. If they want to try to market again to lease purchase or non-traditional buyer, I'm going to tell you that's a waste of your time too. It's more confusing than helpful. And at the end of the day, if you're marketing, you're generating interest from non-traditional buyers, chances are they could pilfer that buyer from you. You'd never know. So those are 2 things that we say no to. But if they're marketing traditional and they can't pull that line out of the water, it's up to you to take that contract or not. I can tell you this, in our early days, and Mike will remember these very well, we had a handful of deals that, of course, we're building inventory. We started with nothing here, just like you did. And as we were building inventory, we ran across some deals similar to that, where the realtor, in this case, realtor was one of those that was a non-exclusive, but the seller had a clause in their contract that allowed them to sell it themselves. And then we also dealt with some sellers, and we took it as a challenge. I mean, we were ready to, go to war and see who could sell it first. And I vividly remember, I think we sold them all. Maybe that's just my memory, conveniently remembering it. But I can tell you that we absolutely, the ones where there were some realtors involved, and all due respect to realtors, Lori in our office is a realtor, and we work with realtors all the time. But we want to show them how it was done. And so we took it as a challenge. So, by the way, in your early days, when you have inventory on your website, there are collateral benefits that come with it. You're going to get other buyers that call. It may not be the right house. It looks good on your website. In fact, I know it's one of the things we talk about a lot. When you have higher dollar homes on your website, those are typically tougher sells, but they look really good for lower priced homes. In fact, Mark Dietrich, who I think is on this, had a house that was, I think, $650,000 and had some things that may make it a tougher sell, although that might be a premature statement. But I said, having that on your website to a $300,000 seller is going to look really good. I remember we had some $1 million ones in the early days, and it helped with the lower price ones. You want to add something to that?
I was just going to say that, especially if you're not going to
Step
get
up
that,
here, yeah.
if you're not going to get that window of exclusivity, it's even more important that you do negotiate that initial strike price down. That way, all right. That way you don't have conflicting prices out there. You can overcome that by saying, if you're writing a check today, obviously you're going to get a little bit of a better deal. If you're asking the seller to wait 6, 12, 18 months, there is going to be a premium associated with it. But if they're not going to give you that window, even more important for you to negotiate that price down, that minimum of $10,000. That way your go-to-market price is the same price they're listing at.
That's exactly right. And then you can take it out at Zillow, and there's no price change on Zillow as well. So, Dan, you want to make a...
Don has asked to repeat, at what price do you go to the seller to try to get more than the 10?
Great question. So the question was, at what point do we try to increase the minimum $10,000? And our rule of thumb is really going to be that $500,000 mark. So the answer is that when you're getting around 500,000 or more, you should be inserting at least a $15,000 minimum. Frankly, it probably should be closer to 20, but we're going to say 15 is really the answer. We'd be happy with that, and ultimately, it's really a perception of value. You're dealing with higher priced home. If you were to factor in a 3 or 6% commission for an agent, obviously the math is a lot different, and that's really where we want to make sure that we're pricing it accordingly. And by the way, it's a great question. $500,000 and up should be when you increase it to 15,000. But if you don't increase it and you're only asking or inserting a $10,000 fee on a $750,000 house, can't that actually have the opposite effect from a value perception from the seller? And the answer is yes. If you're not charging enough or inserting enough of a margin, you can actually devalue yourself by making that mistake, which is why we want to make sure that we increase the price accordingly, the profit accordingly based on the price of the home. I hope that answers the question. So, okay, and I'm just going to circle back real quick on the non-exclusive. In your early days, when someone doesn't want to take the house off the market and you're going to be marketing essentially in tandem with them, we've already told you the no-nos, what you won't do if that is the scenario where they don't want to take it off the market and give you exclusivity. No rentals and no non-traditional competition marketing with the seller. We won't do that, but as long as they're fishing a different pond, it's a personal decision. I'm going to tell you, in your early days, bounce it off us. Let us know what the deal is, what the scenario is. I can tell you, in almost every case, we're probably going to recommend it until you get to a point where you have sufficient inventory. When you have 5, 10 or more homes under contract, you may not be as inclined to take a non-exclusive agreement where the seller wants to market in tandem. But until you get to that point, I'm going to tell you that our advice is usually going to be to take it. But run it by us so we can just make sure that you're not missing anything and that there's no other items that weren't discussed prior to jumping in. I can tell you it's happened to us, and in non-exclusive agreements it will happen where the seller does sell it. And I've given an example in many of the trainings. One Friday, Drew was heading back to Tallahassee. This is prior to him moving into Jacksonville, and was leaving at noon early that day. And I got a text message from him at 8 o'clock that night that he had Misty Marsh, that came to me, that he was writing a deal, or he wrote a deal on Misty Marsh, and it was to an ex-NFL Jaguar player, and I think a $20,000 or $25,000 down payment. It's a great deal. It was a great way to go into the weekend. We were kind of high-fiving over the phone, and then Monday morning we find out that the seller took another offer. So it was a kick in the gut. It was a kick in the gut. I don't know how else to say it, but that's part of business. It's part of life. So get over it. If you're going to take an non-exclusive, that's the downside right there. So, okay. Having said that, those were kind of the sidebar points I wanted to convey. Let's go ahead and get into the script. You guys have anything else you want to add? Okay, very good. Okay, so Danny, you sent this out, right?
Yep.
All right. This is just a revised script, and guys, I can almost guarantee you we're going to have another revision in 6 months. And we're always wanting to tweak, make better, revise, stay current with the times. I'm a junkie for trainings and webinars, so I may hear something in the next month that I really like, and we may insert it. But as we sit here, and by the way, none of them are going to be big deviants from the kind of foundational script, but we like to add some tweaks here and there. In fact, we just added something to this script that we say a lot but wasn't in the script prior. So nothing in here I think is going to be new to you. It's just a certain flow and chronology. So I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to share with you in the very beginning a couple of sentences here what I identified recently with some of the things that were being omitted in that call. And then I'm going to ask Mike to kind of chime in on some of these key points here, and we're going to go through it. So I'm not going to role play per se, but let me just kind of read through the script. So I always like to say bubbly. In fact, sometimes I know we joke about Crystal, and but her voice very much carries. But she has such a bubbly personality that it really really shines through on the phone. And I think people like to do business with that. I know it's such a simple statement, but I've always believed people like to do business with us because we don't take ourselves too seriously. We have fun, and we try to kind of correlate that into our phone calls. So anyway, hi, I'm calling about the house you have for sale. And then you can see in the italics that those are not scripting points, those are points to be taken. So you say you want to pause. And I do, it's kind of funny, I have a couple people in the back of my mind, but sometimes people get so excited to have the phone call that they don't remember to take a breath. So remember, this is a conversation, it's a back and forth. Hi, I'm calling about the house you have for sale. Pause, right? Is this blank? Now remember, this is a second call script, so you should have seller's name in front of you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, good night. What's the Truman Show, right? Anyway, but say, hey, good evening. My name is Scott Ulmer. And what I put in here in italics is make sure you say your first and last name. It's a detail. You could say, oh, it's not important, but to me it's always important. By saying, hey, this is Scott, I'm calling about your home for sale, it's almost as if you're intentionally leaving your last name out. So very small, but to me it's very important. So my name is blank, first and last name, and I'm following up to a call that you had with an assistant of mine named Crystal last week. Do you remember that call? Pause. This is another point that I identified, and this is a really big deal, and let me make sure I explain why. We've created a warm lead for you, whether you're getting them from us or somebody else. If it's a second call, you have had somebody that has created a warm lead, taken a cold call, created it warm, or turned it warm. They've really cracked the door if they've done their job. They've explained kind of the overview and the essence of our program, no details, but they have provided you a lead that is warm. When you call the seller and you ask that question, do you remember speaking to my assistant? Do you remember that call? And you get people that are every type of state of mind. I've talked to a lot of people. I don't remember that call, or maybe, or whatever they say. If you don't connect the dot with that seller back to the fact that they had this call prior, you're essentially making a cold call. And you're starting from scratch. So what I've heard many times is people kind of glance right past that. Do you remember that call? Yeah, I get a lot of calls. Okay, well let me just keep going here and not try to connect the dot backwards. By not connecting the dot, you're taking a warm lead and converting it cold. You guys want to add to that at all? Anything to add? Danny? Okay. It's simple, but again, I see people brush right past it, and the seller doesn't acknowledge it, doesn't remember it, or pretends they don't remember it, or whatever the case is, and then we as the caller go right past it. It's very important you connect the dot back on that.
I think just slow down in that first couple minutes of the script. Slow down, connect the dots, those sales anchors, developing the rapport. I don't think you can take too much time doing that. If you dive in too soon, they're going to be confused.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think slowing down is just key. Well, that's exactly right. Danny said if you don't connect the dot, you're burning a lead. What was the purpose of us? And forget our time or efforts in calling it. This is really about you. What was the benefit of giving that lead if you don't connect the dot back? And it's that small, but could have that big of impact on the call itself. So, okay. And again, one of the things in the italicized part here is that many sellers will identify with the question regarding executive lease purchase. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But sometimes we say one of the questions she asked you was about executive lease purchase, and that should trigger their memory. So, great. By the way, am I catching you at a good time? Question. I ask my wife that question. She always laughs at me, but it's a habit. I always ask, hey, am I catching you at a good time, right? And I don't need to explain this, but if you're not catching someone at a good time, do you think that you're probably going to have ample time to share what you have to share or get the answers you want to get? The answer is no. So you always want to make sure it's a good time before just diving into the script. It goes back to what Mike said. Slow down. Make sure you are taking your time and going through things. So am I catching you at a good time? Great. Let me start by confirming some of the information here. And by the way, pardon me, I put a little italicized part under that. If they tell you it's not a good time or you have some indication, I remember making a call one time and it was a gentleman who had a $500,000 house. It was free and clear, as I remember. That has no merit to this example, but I could hear kids in the background and I could hear what sounded like a PA system over a loudspeaker, and I said, hey, am I catch you at a good time? He said, I'm just in the waiting room at the doctor's office, but I can talk. Well, people, loudspeaker in the background, kids screaming in the back, it was not a good time. So I said, you know what, listen, it doesn't sound like a good time, no big deal. When's a good time for me to give you a call back? And what I'd like to do is maybe send you an email, get you some preliminary information on why I'm calling, and then I can follow up after that. When's a good time to try you back? I've always liked that. It's a way to at least get some preliminary information to them and ultimately try to identify a good time to call back. But make sure it's a good time. All right, let me start by confirming some of the information here. It looks like you have a 4-bed, 3-bath house, approximately 2,600 square feet, 2-car garage, da-da-da-da-da. I've always liked asking some real basic questions, and there's two reasons for that. Reason number one is it's a chance to build rapport. It's good to just kind of talk a little bit instead of kind of diving in and going right for the jugular. Develop that rapport. Ask a little bit about the home. There was a lady I worked with at one point named Hollis, and Hollis would always pull up the house and have it on her computer screen and would be able to talk intelligently about it and say, that's a great kitchen. I love that island, or I love the paint color you have on the outside, or I love your landscaping. I mean, whatever it is, you're identifying with the home, number one. And number two, you're also getting a chance to build rapport. And when you start talking about things like that, most sellers kind of open up because they love talking about their home. And frankly, that's a great way to really break the ice, crack the door, and start to develop some rapport. So that I've always felt is really important. The second reason is this, that, and not that we do it here, because I can tell you we don't, but depending on where you get your leads from, if you're getting them from another source, sometimes VAs or virtual assistants will just pull the merits or metrics of the home offline. They don't really have any verification, if you will. So they're not asking a seller, hey, beds, baths, square feet, you know, do you have a garage, do you have a pool, you know, what are the highlights, etc. They're just going right to a Zillow or some online site that has those beds, baths, square footage, and guess what? Those aren't always perfect. Those can have mistakes in them. So you want to make sure that A, you're building rapport, it's an opportunity, and again, get the seller talking a little bit, tell them about the home, what they love, some of the features and benefits, etc., and at the same time, you're verifying information. So, okay, and then the next question is, and you are asking blank for the home. You're asking $200,000 for the home. Is all that accurate? All right. Do you mind if I ask how you came up with your price? Very soft, right? Or how'd you come up with your price, right? And I've had people, in fact, what's funny to me, I guess, is the people that have a little bit of savvy or seasoning in real estate, who are accustomed to kind of making offers and kind of smacking people in the knees, so to speak, can come across very matter of fact, very straightforward. How'd you come up with your price? Well, that's not really a kind of pleasant back and forth type of statement as far as how you've asked it, the enunciation in your voice. So we're very soft. We're not hard sells here, never will be. That's never going to change, and I think that's one of the things that people like about us in many levels, not only as affiliates, but certainly as buyers and sellers. We're not hard sells. But you mind if I ask how you came up with your price? That's going to give you a basis, and we make fun of this sometimes in our trainings, but you'll get some real quirky answers. Mike says, "What's the guy that my cousin's girlfriend works as a receptionist at a real estate office, and that's what she said we should list it at." Or you get some real quirky answers, or you get someone says, we were getting ready to sell it, and we wanted to order a bona fide appraisal to kind of see where the price would come in at. Or I have a friend who's a realtor, or whatever the case is, and you will get some legitimate answers. You'll also get some illegitimate answers, and that's why we ask it, of course. And let me add one little tidbit here. It's regarding when someone tells you they had an appraisal. Anytime someone had an appraisal, your next question, and this is not in the script, by the way, your next question should be, do you mind if I ask the purpose of the appraisal? The purpose of the appraisal can really have a big difference in whether or not the appraisal is valid. I gave you an example a minute ago of someone who was getting ready to sell their home, so they went ahead and got a bona fide appraisal. I've had people tell me that a realtor who they knew as a friend in another state did a CMA, or comparative market analysis, and they called that an appraisal. Or a realtor or a friend that supposedly was an expert in real estate said you should list the home at this, and they considered that an appraisal. Let me also say that if someone is refinancing their home, meaning they have a 6% interest rate and they can refinance at 4.5%, most lenders don't pay for or require a bona fide $450 appraisal. They'll actually consider a drive-by appraisal an appraisal, or what's called a BPO, broker professional opinion, where they will send a licensed agent or broker out to a home to kind of give their assessment. And many times they're not even going in the house. So a refinance appraisal, I typically will discount a little bit. We had a seller in the past 30 days or so. It was one of our affiliates where they were on the phone. We were on speakerphone with them here at the office in corporate, and they said, "Oh, I had an appraisal for X amount," whatever it was. And we said, "Do you mind if I ask what the purpose of the appraisal was?" And now, mind you, it's 2018. They said, we were buying or refinancing in 2008, or we got it in, so it was 10 years old. 10 years old. That's not a good appraisal today, in particular when it was in the peak of the market, right? So you always want to ask that and just kind of have an understanding or an idea of what that actually means. And in many cases, it doesn't mean what they think it means, which is obviously why we ask it. So, do you mind if I ask how you came up with your price? Okay, sounds like a great house. You mind if I ask why you're selling? Now, you should know this answer based on your lead sheet and the reason that they're selling, because it's obviously one of the questions we ask and we want to know. Obviously, if they are getting a job transfer and moving and they're leaving in 3 weeks, we know in 3 weeks they're more likely than not going to have another house payment. Now they have some pain in their life that should increase or enhance motivation. But again, knowing why they're selling in many ways can give you their motivation, and obviously that can be very key to the deal. Let me continue here with the script. Well, let me be very clear up front. I'm not a real estate agent looking to get a listing. I'm sure you've gotten plenty of those calls. Ha ha ha. We do laugh in reality because most people that are for sale by owner have had a lot of agents calling them trying to get listings. Well, say again?
Don't laugh creepy like that.
Yeah, don't do it. Danny says don't give the creepy laugh. That was a little on the creepy side. Yeah, that was not my real laugh. You don't want to hear my real laugh. So anyway, but you do want to kind of have fun with it because many times they're going to agree with you. Yes, we've gotten many calls from agents. By the way, this is rhetorical, but why don't FSBO sellers list their home with agents? Typically, it's one reason, and that is they don't want to pay the commission. It's usually that simple. So you want to kind of chuckle at that and make light of it. Next paragraph is, however, I do work with a national real estate investment firm locally here in blank, your city. But I'm not going to make some sort of a lowball cash offer, actually quite the opposite. Now, in this conversation I had with one of our affiliates last week, on a few occasions, he failed to mention national real estate investment firm locally here in blank. Guys, again, you have a national brand, you have credibility in that brand, you have a site that has, a website has multiple cities. Use it to your advantage. It's silly that you wouldn't make sure that that was in your script. So, and that was not an intentional oversight. It just in the context of our role playing, he had forgotten to insert the fact that we are a national, work with a national real estate investment firm locally here in blank. So make sure, it's kind of like not connecting the dot with the cold call from Crystal and warming up the lead. If you don't connect that dot, you're basically calling a lead out of nowhere and burning up a good lead. If you don't let them know that you're affiliated with us, that you work with a national real estate investment firm locally here, what's the benefit of having us? I'd argue that, obviously, but at the end of the day, the brand and the national presence is a value to you guys. Use it. Make sure it's in there. Okay. I work in a very specific niche of non-traditional real estate here in blank, and I instructed Crystal to reach out to you and ask you a very specific question when she called. That being, if I could bring you a full price offer very close to it, terms that you ultimately deem very favorable and could completely cash you out in a relatively short period of time, typically anywhere from 6 to 12 months, would you consider selling on an executive lease purchase, which is simply a structured agreement to buy the home from day one, where payments are made directly to you until our buyer is able to qualify for a mortgage? That time frame, by the way, will be known up front. So again, very simple, but we want to connect the dot with what the executive lease purchase is. And it is a simple agreement to buy the home from day one. Payments are made directly to you until our buyer can qualify for their traditional bank financing. That's it. Let me continue. When Crystal reached out to you, she spoke a little about our executive lease purchase program and took some notes and shared with me that you had said this. Now remember, in the lead sheet, there's what we call our QQ, or qualifying question. The qualifying question is essentially what I just said. If we could get you cashed out in a short period of time, full price offer very close to it, would you consider taking payments for a short period of time? Depending on their response, we're going to give it a priority 1, 2, or 3 rating, so you'll know if it is hot. Many of you watching know that we'll call you or email you when we have a hot lead. When there's one that can't wait, you're going to get a call the minute that lead has been hung up. So obviously you'll know those priority ratings, but you also want to know what their answer is, and that again should shed some light on kind of where they are and what their motivation is. So she said it was something you might consider, and that's really the nature of my call today. Now don't forget, I'm going to say this, I'm going to hit the pause button here. We relay this out in a chronology that we like the most. I still encourage you, I still want you to make it your script. I was speaking with Lev out in San Diego yesterday, and she was saying that When she reads a script, she feels like she sounds like she's reading a script. So she doesn't want to read the script, and I can appreciate that. So that just means you have to practice it enough to kind of know it, so you can ebb and flow very smoothly. But at the end of the day, if anything in here doesn't sound like what you might say, feel free to change it, but this is the flow that we want to see. And you will notice, for those that have been around a bit, we don't have the phrase, let me unpack that statement in there anymore. That's a Mikeism. Mike put that in early on, and I said, I just would never say that. It's just not my lingo. So we're getting the weird look again here. All right, so let me keep going here. Great. Are you familiar with how an executive lease purchase works? I'd be happy to give you some information on it and ultimately share with you in detail how it works. Again, we're not agents, but a national real estate investment firm locally here in Jacksonville. The way our program works is that we would agree to purchase the home from you at your full asking price or very close to it. We then work with buyers who would love to purchase the home from us. It's really that simple. And I tell people in kind of more an off the cuff, we're going to take it, bring it into our portfolio and sell it out of our portfolio, which is very simple. There's not a lot of moving parts. It doesn't really require a detailed explanation other than that. And we're going to get to some more details as we go, but that's really the essence of how the program works. We're currently working with about 22 qualified buyers looking for a home like yours and in your price range that can afford a mortgage and a down payment, but due to tough banking restrictions, might not be able to walk into a bank today and qualify for traditional financing. We help provide them with a stepping stone or a bridge to their permanent financing. I'm sure you know someone like that. And that's something that Mike wanted to put in. Says it a lot as a trailer, but it's kind of that personal connection. Everybody knows somebody that fits that profile, that generates a good living, in many cases has decent credit, but for a multitude of possible reasons can't walk into the bank. By personalizing or humanizing it in their mind, they connect those dots. Oh yeah, my brother, that just happened to my brother last week, or whatever the case might be. And I also, there's that one point I want to make. I'm going to pause again, and as we go through, I'm going to probably pause a lot. The Fed just raised interest rates last week by a quarter point, indicated they're going to raise them by 2 more quarter points before the end of the year. Doesn't really mean a ton, but it is something that's good to know. Obviously, the higher interest rates go, the higher the monthly payments likely will be. They're moving up in very, very small increments right now, but they are forecasting at least 2 more rate adjustments upward, or rate increases, over the next 6 months or so. So again, just information, probably good to have that in your back pocket. So, but it also speaks to banking restrictions and regulations, and even though we're seeing some loans and loan products that are eerily similar to 2008, still have very, very tough restrictions. We hear it all the time, and I'm sure you do too. People that should qualify under normal circumstances 10 years ago plus would have qualified, but today can't qualify. So having said that, let me go ahead and push unpause here. I always like to give a kind of a snapshot of a great buyer, a kind of a classic example. And again, just like correlating to someone that they may know who fits this profile, I like to give this example. And I have it in scripting, but I'll just share it with you. A great example of one of our buyers is a couple that is ready to make the plunge, buy their first home, have money saved up, good credit, good credentials. They go to a local realtor and or local lender and get pre-approved. And of course, any realtor worth their salt is going to get a pre-approval before they get in the car and start showing houses. So they get their pre-approval letter, that magic pre-approval letter, right? What could possibly go wrong with that? Well, they get in the car, look at a dozen homes, find one they like, they negotiate it, ultimately get it accepted. Unless they're paying cash, it's contingent on financing. They go back to the lender for their permanent financing, and for one reason or another, they get denied. And by the way, I've shared this many times, in Jacksonville, Florida, 25% of all deals right now fall through for financing. So out of 100 deals, 25 of them go sideways. Those are our buyers right there. Those 25 are our buyers. So you don't need to give that quite lengthy of an example, but it's good to have that in your back pocket. And again, it just shows that that is a good example for us. And I also say in the script here, typically those people don't need a tremendous amount of time to get approved or qualified for their mortgage, but they can't qualify today. And what's really a fact is that most of them, even after being pre-approved and then denied at their permanent financing, still don't have the exact knowledge or specifics on what they need to do to get approved, which is mind-blowing to me, but it's very, very much the truth. There are lenders out there, or realtors even, who, when they have a client who gets denied, say, look, Here's why ultimately, but more importantly, these are the steps that you need to take, and this is the time frame that you need to get it done in. And if you do these things, and I'm going to work with you along the way, then we can write the loan in the next year. Very rarely does that happen. Realtors and more importantly, more specifically, mortgage lenders, mortgage brokers are instant gratification commission people. Nothing wrong with that. I am too, by the way. So, but they're looking for the next instant gratification. And so most don't take time and educate their client as to what they need to do to get that next step. And again, that's a plus for us because that's exactly what we do. So, and I say most don't ever know how quite to get to the point of being qualified. What we do, we line our buyer up with a national lender and mortgage readiness specialist who's going to fully vet them for you. Then they're going to provide a step-by-step blueprint to follow and also follow up to make sure they stick to the plan. And you're going to see, we just rolled out a bunch of new documents, I think 71 total, and we have a much more refined and stringent post-closing system. So what means once the buyer's in the home, this is not part of the script, by the way, but it's good to know these things in correlation to the script. Once the buyer's in the home, we have processes and procedures that require them by virtue of our contract to work with a lender and work with a mortgage planning and preparation specialist within the first 30 days of them being in the home. So they're required by contract to do that. They have a third party that's checking on them every month and making sure that they stick to the blueprint that we have formulated for them, and that is really a hand-holding that is critical to getting many of them successfully financed out. Great for the seller to know that, of course, in an abbreviated fashion. Let me continue along with the script here. At the end of the term, these folks will also write the loan, so they have a huge incentive to make sure the buyer gets to the finish line, and that's very true, by the way. It's a large part of why our program works so well. Plus, we require a significant down payment up front, and I'll get to that in just a minute here. How does that sound so far? Great. We also work with sellers like you who are willing and able to be flexible in their approach to selling their home. In exchange for that, we typically are able to maximize the value of their home and get the maximum return on what is most people's largest investment, and that's very true. Why do sellers do this? It's economic. It's about the math, and that's what we want to harp on, obviously. Here's how it works. First, we can typically get our buyers to pay your full asking price or very close to it since they're really not in a position to negotiate. They will agree to buy the home from day one and also agree to make payments directly to you for a predetermined amount of time. Of course, we're going to know that up front, and that's going to be set by a third-party lender. That time frame is going to be set based on the amount of time they need to get their financing. Again, everybody on this training knows that fact. So not only are you getting a full price offer or very close to it, but those payments made during the term will not credit off the sale price of the home. They're above and beyond the sale price and strictly to your benefit. So basically, they'll pay down your mortgage during the term or put cash in your pocket if you're free and clear. We run each buyer through a third-party lender that will take them through underwriting just like they would for a traditional loan, with the full understanding the buyer is likely not going to qualify today. There are two important facts that come from that qualifying call, from that screening call, and those are the why and the when. The why is the buyer can't get financing, and that's their backstory. That's really important to know. We want to know who we're dealing with and the reasons that they can't get their mortgage. That's important to know. I've always felt that, and certainly if I'm a seller, I want to know, why did you get denied, or why were you not able to get your loan in place? That's important, but what's really more important is the when, and that's really the second part of this. There's a multitude of reasons folks can't get their financing today, and we like to give some examples in our script. We work with a lot of business owners who don't show enough income. In fact, there was a period of time, I think we had 5 or 6 sales in a row, all the self-employed business owners, and it was Drew at that time had said, we've got to just go on a campaign targeting these self-employeds because that's a huge demographic for us. It's a huge demographic of the business population, and a lot of those folks earn a heck of a lot of money, but they write it all off. Well, loans are based on net income. So it's not what you earn, it's what you're taking home at the end of the day based on your tax return. So self-employed business owners is a big demographic. If someone went through a divorce recently, I've never seen a divorce come out where the credit was clean at the end. So almost certainly there are going to be some hiccups there. Not always credit. We always want to stress that. In the price points we deal with, the caliber of buyers we work with, it's not always they have bad credit, and that's why I'm here. There are other factors that are involved in that. There's a lot of reasons that good folks can't get financing today, but all of them are very fixable, and that's important to know. That's what we do. It's what we specialize in. And the when is a time frame that they're going to need to fix whatever's broken so they can get their loan and get it in place. The time frame for that is determined by that third party that will work with our buyer to show them the exact steps to get to that point of successful financing. So you're going to know that time frame up front once they're fully vetted, and we simply wrap the lease purchase agreement around that window of time. Pretty simple. We want to set them up for success from day one so we don't give them less time than they need, but we also want to incentivize them to get their financing as soon as possible so we don't give them any more time than they need either. The vast majority of our buyers are able to qualify in a 6 to 12, maybe 18-month window, so we're not talking about a terribly long period of time. There's a few key points I want to share with you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. They're important for you to know. Number one, the title will stay in your name until you've been paid in full. That way you never lose control of the home. Now, for those in Texas, and I think we only have 2 right now in Texas, that is a little bit of a different scenario. I'm not going to go into that on this training, but we'll do so in a separate training. Everybody else, the title stays in the seller's name until they're paid in full. You don't have any obligation to accept any offer I bring. If the deal or the buyer is not right, you simply reject the offer. We'll bring another one to the table. It's that simple. We're going to set up the monthly payment to be drafted from the buyer's account and put into yours on the first of each month, so there's no collection process. And the buyer pays to set this up. We want to let them know that as well. There's no cost for them to do so. We use a third-party escrow servicing company based out of New Orleans, Louisiana. We know the owners of the company very well, great people, and they do a great job. And by the way, it's an escrow servicing company. It's a $75 one-time setup fee, and yes, it's on the cut sheet that maps it out for the buyer, $75 one time and $15 per month to have this drafted every month. Drafted from buyer's account. The first payment goes to the underlying mortgage, and anything above that, if there is anything above that, would be deposited into the seller's account. The escrow is set up for a purpose. A, it gives an electronic pay history, so when our buyer is ready to go to the bank, they can just have a printout emailed over to them from a third party. And it also ensures that the underlying mortgage gets paid so there's no equity skimming. And that's a safety measure for all parties, but in particular the buyer. And then the next part of the script says, I really think you like this part, there's no repairs or upkeep responsibilities for you because the buyer is responsible for the entire home. We only ask that you warranty the major mechanical systems for the first 30 days, and we do ask that you provide a 1-year home warranty. That just in case something major breaks. Now listen, let me push pause. We have a couple home warranty companies that we work with. We have a form that is a new part of our seller documents. So you'll have that form signed at the time that you're at the house getting the contract. And all it is a simple acknowledgement from the seller that they're going to provide a home warranty. Typically they cost anywhere from $400 to $600. If you have a pool or mechanicals of the pool, those can increase some of the cost, appliances as well, but you're looking at somewhere in the $400 to $600 range for a 1-year policy, and you also, the deductible is anywhere from $40 to $75, somewhere in that range. Aside from the first 30 days, the buyer will pay the deductible. If it's in the first 30 days, the seller would need to pay the deductible if there is one. After the 30 days, it's the buyer's responsibility. But we've learned over time it's an important benefit and sell feature for all parties, and the seller included, to have that 1-year home warranty as a backstop just in case. It's peace of mind, and there are some other correlating benefits to that. So we want to make sure that we put that in there. Now you're probably wondering what's in it for me, right? And I'm not going to give you my creepy chuckle again, but you can chuckle there too. Again, brevity kind of takes the wall down. It's a serious question, but obviously we want to make it a little light. I'd love to tell you we make our money in 2 ways, both of which affect you, but really only one of which does so financially. If I identify a buyer with the right stuff, and you love the deal and take it, the only money you owe my company, and by the way, I stress that, my company, through the context of our role-playing over the years and conversations with sellers, saying my company seems more professional, it comes across in a more just professional way than owe me the first month's payment. You owe my company. So we really like that phrase. We want to keep it in there. So the only money you owe my company is the first month's payment coming from the buyer. All other payments after the first will be made directly to you by the direct deposit I mentioned earlier. The only other cost would be the home warranty, and that doesn't cost much at all. Second, so you have peace of mind that we're in this with you until the end. We also collect the last payment prior to the buyer financing, which is the time that they're getting ready to cash you out. So we want to put that in there because number one, the trailer is that they're getting ready to get a big cash out, and we're only collecting the last payment prior to the cash out, and that is really to incentivize us to remain in the deal and ultimately give them peace of mind. And we get that often. People like it, but they want to make sure that they're not going to be basically stuck on an island once the deal has consummated. So it's nice for them to know that they do have us involved in the very end, and in exchange for that, we do ask for the very last payment as well. But the way we make the lion's share of our money, and yes, we are certainly a for-profit company, is in the form of a one-time, upfront, non-refundable down payment from the buyer. That amount will be above and beyond your asking price, so it does not take away from your bottom line. But what it will do is force the buyer to have a lot of financial skin in the game, which is the reason this program works so well, and is the glue that keeps them to your home. Important to share that. To give you full transparency, my minimum fee to the buyer at your price point will be, and I put a blank here, but $10,000 if it's under $500,000, $15,000 if it's over $500,000. And again, we did want to insert the word minimum fee. That does allow us to have the door open if in fact there are more, a larger down payment. We want to try to carve out more than $10,000. Now this has been a point of debate, not contention, but debate. We just want you to get your first couple of deals closed. I've always found it hard to argue if you don't have to buy the house and you can make 10 grand plus the first payment and then ultimately the last payment. I have a tough time arguing with that. Now, do I want to see you make 20? Have we made over 30 on a handful of occasions? Sure. Yes, we have, and we've had a couple other ones, not us, one of our affiliates has made as much as 60 on a deal. Those are great. Love to talk about those. We don't talk a lot about those bread and butter deals where we just made 10 and the $1,500 payment. Those pay bills, those are great closings, but we want you to get a couple of those before you start negotiating and trying to carve out more than that. And so, point of debate, and whether or not we should just say a flat $10,000 and first payment, or if we should try to carve out more. I can hear Mike breathing heavy over here. You want to add to that?
No.
Okay. Danny, you want to add to that at all? It's. I think you all understand kind of where we're coming from, and in that vein, get a couple closings under your belt, and you will watch your mojo change a little bit. You walk a little taller and arch those shoulders back a little bit, feeling yourself a little bit like Danny is right now. So anyway, but that's something that I obviously wanted to share there. So, however, we typically, this is the trailer to that. My minimum fee is $10,000. However, we typically require 5 to 10% down. Therefore, anything above and beyond my company, I like that phrase. Therefore, anything above and beyond my company's fee will be money that you'll receive up front as well. And that number, if any, will be presented to you prior to closing with a formal offer. Okay, fairly straightforward. By the way, again, this is pretty much meat and potatoes. These are things that you've already had in your script, but I'm kind of going through them again in that chronological fashion we want to see. There's really not a lot of moving parts here, and only 4 variables to consider in a formal offer. Number one, asking price. I don't have any reason to believe I can't get you what you're asking very close to it. By the way, you don't need to dive in on these. You're just covering these points, and that's a takeaway. There was a point I wanted to take this all out of the script. I just thought it was too much, but if you are just covering these quickly, not diving in, you're pointing out to them something that's important. Look, this might be non-traditional, this might be out of the box, it might not be something you're entirely familiar with or accustomed to, but there's not a lot of moving parts. There's only 4 variables in every offer. In hindsight, and it's certainly looking forward, I do like it and I want to keep it in there, which is obviously why it's there. So, but you're just going to kind of gloss through them. Number one, asking price. I've got no reason to believe I can't bring you or offer you what you're asking very close to it. Number 2 is the monthly payment. Number 3, the term or length of time the buyer is going to need to get their financing. The time frame, again, is going to be known and presented to you up front, and as I mentioned earlier, our entire agreement with them is going to be wrapped around that time frame, solely around that time frame, because that's the time frame they need based on a third-party lender. It's a lot smarter than we are. And of course, the 4th is the non-refundable down payment made to you prior to occupancy. It's based on those 4 variables and the buyer as a whole. We will let you decide if it's an offer that's acceptable and something you're comfortable moving forward with. So I know I threw a lot at you right there. Any question up this point, or everything making sense? Now, we don't have in our script pause points. Oh, at the very beginning, we want you to take your time, but there's a dialogue. If you're doing all the talking and there's nothing on the other end, that's either really good or really bad. I don't know. You want to have that back and forth, obviously. So you want to stop every so often and ask, and is what I'm saying making sense? because it's me, I always say, look, I talk really fast sometimes, have a bad habit of doing that. Am I making sense? Are you understanding everything I'm saying clearly?
Yeah.
You want to add, Michael?
Yeah, or things like, does that sound fair? Or does that sound like it could work for you? Even if it's just kind of a vague, are you following me? Any questions at this point? Your trial closing, the more often you can get them to say yes to you throughout the script, the higher your increased odds are going to be of getting that appointment. They've said yes 3, 4, 5, 6 times. They're almost programmed to that right now, so that might not sound like big questions, but just getting yes responses to anything you're asking is going to go a long way.
It's actually a great sales psychology. Mike has brought a lot of that to the table. There is a psychology when you're asking them throughout the context of the script. Does that sound fair? Does that make sense? Even if they're not saying yes to the deal, but they're saying yes to your rhetorical or somewhat rhetorical questions, that does kind of get them in a mindset and ultimately can reaffirm the sale at the end when you're asking really for the business. So very good. So back and forth dialogue is important. Here we're getting to the very nitty gritty and the bottom line here. Look, all we're looking for is the opportunity to take your house to our market, to our buyers. The fact that you're hearing from me is not a coincidence. And I've always liked that line, by the way. We reached out to you because we were already working with a few buyers who might have an interest in your home. Now, we push pause. I always like to disclaim here. This is the only part where Pinocchio likes to jump in here. We believe in full transparency, full disclosure, soft sells. We don't hide anything. That's just not our style. But I can tell you something I learned a long time ago, Realtor 101. I've got buyers, but you got to give me the listing agreement. And sellers want to hear that. That's just a fact of life. It's just a fact. And so I can tell you this. You get one contract. You put an ad on Craigslist, or how about this? You don't even have to have a contract. You put an ad on Craigslist, you're going to have buyers. So are you really fudging? You could argue with me. I'm putting it out there for a reason. But at the end of the day, I can tell you sellers want to hear that, which is why we have it in our script. Enough said about that. Mike? Okay. So all we're looking for is that opportunity. Our typical sales cycle is short, usually 45 to 60 days, so we're not looking for a terribly long period to perform. We typically ask for 90 days to do so. Again, if they push back on the 90 days, we can discuss it. Would you consider 75 or 60 or 45 or 30? You can work your way down. The only thing we ask of you is during that period is that in good faith you're going to suspend your marketing efforts and really give us a fair shot. Now look, we love the question for the reasons we discussed earlier in this training, but at the end of the day, if that's a stick point for somebody, it's going to be an individual decision. I'm going to encourage you to bounce the scenario off of us. Let us consult with you on the deal. Many times, when that's a stick point, we're still able to go back to the seller and carve out even a 30-day window. And during those 30 days, it's essential you call every week. You let them know what you're doing marketing-wise, that you're making a big push. And obviously, if you've only got 30 days to really sell it, that sense of urgency can really create some great stuff. In fact, not that we like being under the gun in that scenario, but I can tell you there have been many times where I've even said, I kind of like it when we're under the gun because we go out and make it happen. And not that you're not going to do it if 90 days or 6 months, whatever the case might be, but when you've got a limited window of time, you're taking action and you're making it happen, and that's not always a bad thing. So, Michael?
Yeah, and I was just going to
Why
say.
don't you step up here so
Yeah,
they can
sure.
see you?
Also, the days on market is going to go into play on that as far as a marketing exclusivity window. So if it's fresh on the market, it's been on for a couple weeks, it's been on for a month, the likelihood that they're still going to have that, confidence they're going to sell the house in a relatively short window of time is going to be much higher. If it's been on the market for 90 days, 6 months, a year, whatever that case may be. Now, don't rub their nose in it. You can't do that, but you can kind of call out the obvious. I couldn't help but notice your house has been on the market for 6 months or 9 months or, a year. We think we've got a great exit strategy for you. Ultimately, can help you make a lot more money on the sale of the home. Would you give us that short window of time and just try, kind of a plan B or an option B? So take a look at days on market. That's often going to be a pain point for them. That'll go a long way with you when you're helping or trying to negotiate that exclusive window.
Yeah, it's very, very well put, and it was a very soft approach to it. You don't want to rub their face in it, even though it's a fact, but at the same time, you'd be remiss if you didn't point that out. So, okay, all right. So, all right. If there's something that could work with you, my next step is simple. I'd like to meet you at the home, make sure the home's a good fit for us and our portfolio. Now, I'm enunciating that for a reason, and I say this all the time. Even though we're calling you, we're soliciting your business, we're going to qualify you as hard as you're qualifying us. It's posture, it's mindset. I don't know what else to say. It's a great line. Next step is simple. I'd like to come out and take a look at the home. Want to make sure it's a good fit for us and a good fit for our portfolio. By the way, we don't make a dime unless we bring an offer to the table that you approve. So we want to make sure it's the right fit for us. And if you like me and I like the home, we can start our marketing right away. Does that sound fair to you? Again, that rhetorical question. So, and I've seen a couple grammatical things here that we may put a period or a comma in, but the essence of what is wanted is contained in here. So, again, keep in mind, I don't make a dime unless I bring that offer to the table that ultimately you approve. So I want to make sure that it's a marketable home and I can perform in the short period of time that I discussed here. So if all that makes sense, I'd love to set a time to come out and see you. Now, that is really the meat and potato of the script right there. One of the things that we train on, and it's the balance of the script, is that it's only going to be about 1 or so, maybe 2 out of 10 calls that you are getting a 1 call close or an appointment on that first call. Now I say that, but I tell you, I've seen some really good looking leads come out of here, and particularly with Days on Market, where they should be very motivated. And of course, when they and I hear Crystal's calling someone and saying, "I've got a hot lead for you," and sometimes that has merit, other times it may not be as hot as they think. You just never know, but she's relaying to you what she's being told. But what you're going to find in more cases than not is it's not time to get in your car and go. So now you have this scenario. Let's say you just did a great job on the script. You sounded great. It flowed well back and forth. The seller had some questions. You interjected with some pauses. And does that sound fair? Is that making sense? And there's just this interest level, and there's a good dynamic, good energy going on, but not quite ready to get in your car based on whatever tenor that you're perceiving. But it's a good call. How do you conclude it? And I have shared this many times in our trainings, and I've seen it many times where people can kind of freeze at that point. So here's a very simple way to draw a conclusion to the call. Listen, Mr. Seller, here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to send you an email. Notice I didn't ask, I told. I'm going to send you an email. I'm going to go ahead and kind of recap what we discussed. I know I threw a lot at you. It's usually nice to kind of have it in writing to reaffirm what I shared. And that way, if you have someone else in your world you need to share it with, you'll have it in front of you. I'm also going to link you into our website. I'd encourage you to take a look at us, check out some of our other homes, how we market those, as well as some of our testimonials of other clients who have had a good experience with us. And just check us out as a whole. If you have any questions, give us a call. I'll include my contact number as well. If I don't hear from you, I'll follow up with you in 24 to 48 hours to see if you have any questions. And at that time, if it makes sense, we'll set up a time for me to come out to the house and introduce myself face to face, and we can go from there. Does that sound fair? Right? So you're grabbing the bull by the horns, and you are not letting a great call slowly go off the cliff like the movie where the driver goes off the cliff and slowly crashes the car, right? You're grabbing the bull by the horns, you're taking control of the call, you're the expert, you're in control. Listen, here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to send you an email. I'm going to recap everything we had in this conversation. I know I threw a lot at you there, so I've kind of laid it out in a hopefully easy to read and understand sequence. I've pointed out some of the economic benefits as well. I've also included a link to my website. I want you to check us out if you have time. Check out some of our other homes, how they're marketed, and some of our testimonials of satisfied customers. If you have any questions, I'm going to include my contact information as well. Reach out to me, let me know. Otherwise, I'll follow up with you in a day or two to make sure that you got the email okay, and to see if it makes sense for me to come out and introduce myself face to face. Will that work for you? Rhetorical, right? That's how you end the call. Get their email. We've got a great email template. For those that don't have it, we've got the auto-populated features that can, all you do is input the numbers and the rest of the email populates. I created that because I'm very techie. What are you laughing at, man? Oh wait, no, I didn't create that. I'm just kidding. So, but
No, I'm not laughing because I created
yeah,
it.
he didn't. Yeah, what I was saying, you didn't create either, man. What are you laughing at? So, but it's actually a great email, and of course, the economic benefits are really highlighted within that. So, Michael, you seem like you want something to add to
Yeah,
that?
I was just going to say, and Scott, kind of touched on at the beginning of the script here, make it your own, but don't get overboard with that. We've seen some people that have taken this script. Obviously, it can be a little daunting for those of you that are just getting started. It's a very long script. It's by design. There's nothing in there that does not have a purpose. There's a lot of psychology in there. So if you are kind of making it your own, just be careful not to trim too much of the fat out of it. Just taking some of the words that maybe don't sound like you, tweaking those, I think, is more what Scott was referring to as opposed to wholesale changes to the script. The more proficient you can get with this, the better you're going to get at getting contracts Simply put, the script is tried and true. Of course, we made some tweaks to it over the years, but the better and faster you can get at this exact script with a couple small tweaks to make it sound more like you, the better. Wholesale changes are certainly not encouraged, though.
Yeah, I'm gonna concur with that 100%, and I appreciate you clarifying that, because in the context of us advocating you making it your own, we've had some people that have really deviated from what it really is supposed to convey. And again, no names here, but we had a particular affiliate who did very well, had a couple deals under their belt early on, and had some life things happen, which can happen to everybody, and came back to a training probably better part of 8 months later, sat in the office and made some calls with Jeff, and we were frankly taken back by how much they've deviated from the script in their efforts to make it their own. And unfortunately, it really was not good, and we kind of had to start from scratch. So just to share that in a more layman's term, we do want it to sound like you. We do want you to make it yours. We want to flow and not sound like you're reading a script. First of all, that comes from practicing it and practicing it with real live people, but it also comes from, again, changing maybe some wording or maybe a certain phrase, like let me unpack that statement. If it's not you, don't say it, but be careful not to deviate too much from it. It's laid out in a fashion that we think is efficient, and again, it's tried and true, and has been used for many years and certainly revised over time. I'll add one other tidbit on the script, and then I've got one other item I want to cover here. Look, not every call goes according to script. In fact, it's probably safe to say most don't go according to script. If you have an interested seller, we want you to get in your car. We preach that often. We had a gentleman who won't give any backstory, but had a tough time with the script. We went ahead and abbreviated it into 12 points, which all of you have. If you don't, let us know, but every one of you has it. I'm sure of that. As long as those points are conveyed in some way, shape, or form, as long as the seller has a general understanding of our program and has expressed an interest, we just want you to get in your car and go. You're going to exponentially increase your odds of getting the contract in their kitchen and living room than you would over a phone call. You're a real person at that time. It just is a very obvious statement, but we've seen it firsthand make a tremendous difference in people's effectiveness of the script. And then once you get a couple contracts in a living room, now you're more confident on the phone. So at the end of the day, we want you to get through the script, but we also know in some of your early days, having an abbreviated version can actually play very much into your favor just to get the appointment. So, okay, again, script here is nothing that is going to be terribly new. It's just a little bit cleaner and kind of a chronology we like. I will say another thing, look, it's all in the numbers. The more people you call, the more chances you have. So you want to be calling. Ideally, you're going through and sending a couple emails out every day. And then this week you have a couple, and then next week you have a couple, and the following, and all of a sudden you're 30, 60, 90 days in. Now you have a pipeline of 50, 60 people that you've talked to that you're kind of nurturing, and hopefully you're going to get contracts from that. We'd like to see 1 out of every 10 leads turn into a contract, and I don't think that's an unfair statistic or request. And so as you are thinking in your mind right now what your odds or statistics should be, out of every 10 calls you make, we'd like to see 1 convert into a contract. As you get better, obviously we'd like to see those increase, but that is really going to be the metric we want to shoot for on this call. Love to see you talk to at least 15 sellers every week. You talk to 25, it's even better. You don't have to get your leads solely from us. You can create your own or cultivate your own. We encourage that self-generation of leads, but you've got to be talking to people every day. And frankly, if you're not, your results are going to be affected by it. It's a numbers game. I don't care if we're looking at foreclosures or REOs. I don't care what the scenario is. If we were out there looking for foreclosures right now, you'd have to look at least 10, if not 20, to make an offer and really try to get one. No different here. You've got to be talking to people. So, anything you want to add, Mike or Danny? Okay, guys, I just want to conclude here with the objections and rebuttals. These are, again, everyone should have copies of these. We've made some basic changes, but and we'll send these out as well, but it was not as important as the meat of the script. So unfortunately, what we have seen, and that's probably the wrong way to start that phrase out, what we have seen is that some people can be very, very proficient and very good at the script, but the first objection or unobjection can defeat the effort if it's not answered correctly. So let me just run through these with you quickly, and then if there's questions, we certainly will be available to answer those. So what happens if they don't get their financing at the end of the term? It's a question we get every once in a while. There's a few primary reasons why this is a very uncommon occurrence. By the time that you're presented with our buyer offer, they've undergone a very thorough screening and underwriting process by our national lender. We understand they're not qualified for a traditional mortgage, but our lender gives us the timeline needed based on their circumstances and provides a custom blueprint for them to follow to get to that point. Secondly, we mandate a mortgage readiness program that they pay for that monitors their process and progress through the term, making sure there aren't mistakes, that mistakes aren't being made and they are on schedule and there are no surprises. Lastly, these individuals have a significant amount of money at risk that they don't follow the blueprint and get you cashed out in the time frame that's agreed upon. And of course, they stand to lose that money, which is a huge incentive. That's just the answer. Now, you can phrase that really in your own words, but we can't guarantee they're not going to get that they're going to get their financing. But based on those facts, they have a lot of money up front. They've been fully vetted. They have a custom blueprint that they've paid for that shows them the roadmap to financing. They're given a very limited window of time to get their financing. We don't give 5 years, good luck. If you need 9 months, we're probably going to give you 9 or 10 months, give you a little bit of a cushion, but you're not getting some arbitrary, you need 9 months, hey, we'll give you 2 years. It's based on your ability to walk into the bank as a buyer. So those factors, and then we squeeze them into that short window of time. And by virtue of our contract, they're required to work with a lender and this company that we work with called Credit 360 out of Colorado in order to hold their hand and get them to the point of financing. If they follow the blueprint, it's a great way to buy a home. If they don't, ultimately we're going to work with them. We're going to do our best to make sure they do. We have third parties working with them within 30 days of them living in the home. So our whole program is geared for that to them or toward them buying the home. So not getting the financing at the end of the term. Can it happen? Yes. It's unlikely. And if that is the case, we're obviously going to deal with it, and we should know well in advance if there's going to be any delays in the ultimate financing. That's the answer. And again, I kind of gave you some extra tidbits. I'm not suggesting I would answer exactly that way, but those are bullets for your gun. What if they trash the house? Same answer. This is probably the number one most unfounded concern we get. Keep in mind we're dealing with higher end homes in most cases, and like yours, so we're working with a fully vetted buyer that are of a high caliber. If we were talking about a $40,000 Section 8 house, it's probably a different conversation and much more of a valid concern. But these buyers are in a contract to purchase the home. They have a significant amount of money down into the house before they even move in. And they view this as their long-term home. They're viewing this as a purchase from day one, a place they want to be for a long time to come, not a rental. And there's just such a big difference, and it's so easy for me to say it. I don't know if people kind of get the difference, but a rental and a buyer is just night and day, and you've got to convey that. And I don't know how much more bluntly you can say that, but and this is one thing that Mike has always inserted, and I really like is, let me ask you this. Would you put a large chunk of money down on a home you were purchasing and then take a sledgehammer to the walls? It sounds silly, but there's kind of this visual in your mind that says that's just a silly thing, and it's very unlikely that would happen. Well, it's the same thing here. Again, I'm not living there. I can never guarantee that that's not going to happen, but first of all, it's such an unfounded concern. It's one of those nightmare stories that you hear about but rarely ever happens, and particularly on these price points. We're dealing with a high caliber, well-heeled buyer that has a sufficient amount or significant amount of money down that they would stand to lose. We work closely with them throughout the process and the term that they're going to just trash the house. Maybe at a Section 8 here, it's just very, very unlikely. So I can't move in until I sell this house. I can't move, until I sell this house and get the money out for my next house, right? Well, this is the one objection that we can't overcome. And I tell people that. In fact, I'm very forthright about it. If there's one thing we can't overcome is that you need to get the equity out of this home to move into your next. If you need a traditional sale or traditional a buyer, we're probably not your huckleberry. So if you want an agent, we can refer you to one. We have the chance to bring a traditional offer, but you want to understand up front that our target marketing, what we do here, the entire platform of our company is designed for folks that can afford the mortgage and down payment but can't qualify today. So if you need your equity out of your home, I have a couple of suggestions. Number one is if we could get you some today and the balance in a short period of time, how much do you think you might need? So we see people that either think they have to put a down payment on their next home or they're moving across country, they have moving expenses. Well, many times if they could do that for 10 grand, and we can identify that and find that out, then guess what? We know that we have to come up with 10 grand. If they need more than that, it's an identifier that we want to know. If they just need the money, they can't do anything, then we may not be the right game for them. But let me just read some of the other answers we have. Some people are going to get a second mortgage even if they haven't sold the first home, meaning that I can qualify for another loan on another house without having satisfied this one here. Happens all the time. In higher end homes, that possibility exists. By the way, if they could go get another mortgage and buy another house and let this current house work for them, they can generate a yield and a return from this house and really maximize the return on the sale. Isn't that a great scenario? So it's seeing if they could qualify without getting this underlying loan satisfied, qualify for a new home, certainly is an option. Check with your lender on that. Obviously, I'd have no clue. But let me ask you, if you were able to get a significant amount of cash up front and the balance in a short period of time or a short window of time, could that or would that make a difference? If so, how much do you think you would need? Keep in mind there's a major economic benefit for you if you sell this way, so looking at all of your options could really work out well for you financially. Even considering a temporary living situation in order to maximize the sale is something that you may want to think about. We actually had it happen one time. I've never been a big fan of advocating that, but that's not my decision. If they are wanting to downsize and go rent a place for a year or two until this one cashes out because they're going to generate an extra $30,000 or $40,000, not a bad deal. That's their decision, but we can and have thrown that out before. Anything you want to add, Mike?
Nope.
Okay. I don't want you to have marketing exclusivity. Well, we already talked about this, and it's a very common occurrence. So I've already given you the answer. I'll read you what we have here. I can certainly appreciate your position. However, we spend a lot of time, money, and resources when working with our sellers, so we just want a fair shot in selling it in exchange for those efforts. If I didn't think we could perform and bring an offer to the table, you wouldn't be hearing from us. Again, our typical sales cycle is 45 to 60 days, so I'm not talking about a long period of time to perform. Even a 30-day window of exclusivity would be something to work with and something that we would consider. And in parentheses, we have this. Don't kill the deal over this objection on the phone. Such a good point. Go for the appointment. Once you've met the seller at the home, the likelihood for them to give in to this request is tremendously greater. In fact, Mark Dietrich, we had this conversation on Monday. Most folks on the phone are not going to say yes. They're trying to sell their home. Here you call out of the blue. Yes, you've had a warm-up call, but you call and you want them to take their marketing down. Most people are not going to be inclined to do so. That's really an eyeball question. That's an eyeball question. So if you have the chance to get, if you ask it on the phone and they balk at that, do not lose the deal over that. Remember, you may change their tune once they meet you and see you're a real person. On the phone, stay postured and say that's something that you can discuss when you meet, but you need to see the home before making that decision. That's really, really good. You want to add to that at all, Mike?
No.
Okay, so Dan, you want to add something?
Got a question.
What's Love got?
She says, do you want to keep the information of the vetting company to ourselves or give it as credibility?
So the question is, do we want to share with our sellers who the vetting company is? And the answer is no. I've never once had, that may not be true. I don't recall someone asking me who is the company and I want to know who they are. I've just never had that, or at least I don't remember having been asked that question. It's not really relevant. And by the way, I can tell you, we have used and will use multiples. Now, we have one that we work with closely. She gets almost all of our business, but we've used local mortgage lenders. We've had other folks in that world, typically lenders of some sort, that want our business, that have offered to do it, and we've tried them out. We've had several that we've used or run through local mortgage lenders. So we do like this company. We work with out of Texas. It is who we work with. It is who we're going to send all your buyers to. One person individual does a great job in what we need, but it's just not important to share that. If it becomes a stick point or somehow the seller says, hey, look, I need to know who this company is and the whole deal is hinged on it, let us know that. Obviously, it's not some secret, but what we have found is this. Number one, it's not relevant or important to the conversation. But number two, we've had times where our ability to get our buyers vetted from this company has been delayed because of other business they have. So the last thing we want to do is load them up with a bunch of people that aren't part of our company or our team. That's going to fill her up even more and potentially delay some of our responses. So don't think that's a real big concern, but it is something that we have thought about. Okay. Danny, any other questions on that? Okay. All right. But that's really good. Let me just say this one more time. You put that out there, and yes, it's in our script, even though I've always felt that's more of a kitchen table question. Again, the better you get, and when you get to a certain level, you don't want to get in your car unless you know you're getting the contract, they understand clearly, and that you want them to have a window of time that you have exclusivity. Until you get to that point, you want every reason possible to get in front of them. And a question like this, we don't ever want it to kill a deal, particularly before you've seen the home. So go for the appointment, even if it's a stick point for them. And once you've met them and they know you're real and they like you and you're professional in the whole 9 yards, they be much more inclined to concede on that point. Stay postured on the phone and say, look, that's something that we can discuss when we meet, but I need to see the home first before making that decision. That's just a great, great one line there. And that way you're postured, but leaving the door open and not killing the deal over that. And then you can make the decision when you're there. If it's a beautiful home in a beautiful area and they still won't give you the exclusivity even after meeting with them, it's up to you to make that decision. If you're there at the home, they're non-exclusive, they won't cave on that, but they're willing to sign the agreement and get it together and then call us. We'll walk through it, talk through it, assess it, and if we feel together that it's not the right move, you can always call and cancel yourself.
Yeah, back on the days on market with that. So this is kind of the opposite of what I was saying earlier. But if they are stuck on the non-exclusive window and it has been on the market for a long time, that would even be more reason for you to go ahead and take that chance, because what's going to change from 9 months until 10 months, whatever they've been doing, whatever their price point is, something is preventing that house from being able to sell traditionally. You take that exact same piece of property, target our obviously demographic of buyers. It's a brand new listing, so longer days on market, that would probably even give you more inclination to waive that exclusive window.
Yep, very good, very good. All right, one or two more here and then we're done, guys. Actually, this is the last one here. What if they don't pay? It's one of not my favorite questions, but I do like when people ask that. So first and foremost, if they don't pay, they can't stay. And I always tell people, look, can it happen? Again, it can happen. It's just very unlikely. We have a short window of time. These people are here. They put a sizable amount of money down. They're working with us and our third parties literally from the first 30 days they're in the home. We're getting updates and reports every single month. The payments are debited from their account, so it's not as if they're mailing in a check. Now, if the money's not there in the account, it can't be debited. However, we always want to be your first phone call. Yeah, Mr. Seller, if there's an issue with the payment, you don't receive it, it's delayed, it's late, we want to know that. These are relationships that we establish just like we're going to establish with you, Mr. Seller. We get to know our buyers, we know their families, we know what they do for a living, we know their backstory, and we genuinely care. We want to see people become successful homeowners. That's the entire premise of our program and our platform. So if there's an issue, we want to be your first phone call. We want to make sure that we get involved. And if we have to make a visit to the home and have a meeting and kind of sit down and regroup, we're willing and glad to do that. And have not had to do that much here, but there have been one or two times where we've had our buyers come in and say, look guys, we're kind of having a pattern here of late pays or a bounce check here or there. What's going on? What can we do to help? And how can we right the ship here to get you back on track? So let me just read the answer, which is going to be similar to what I said. But first, if they don't pay, it can't stay. That said, it's an extremely uncommon situation for us to deal with for a few reasons. Buyers have a lot of money at risk. If they don't perform, that's definitely a driving force. If there's ever an issue with payment, we're your first call. We want to work to get it resolved as quickly as possible. In an absolute worst case scenario, it would be a simple eviction since you still have the title of the home, and we would handle this on your behalf with our attorney and at our cost. And that's really, really important to share. I want people to know that, and this is something that we put into play a couple years ago at this point, because we realized that if we stand behind it and believe in our buyers as much as we do, which we do, and something goes awry or goes sideways, and we made 10 grand plus the first payment, and in many cases our sellers got no money up front, and our buyer stops paying after 6 months or whatever the case is, we feel it's fair to pay for the eviction. Now, some of you may disagree with that, but we stand behind our buyers and what we're promoting. There's only been one time I can remember where I didn't believe in a buyer and I told the seller that, and they made the decision to go forward anyway, and that was up to them. But By the time we get a buyer vetted, you just never know. Sometimes people that you think are great turn out not to be, and people that you don't think are so great turn out to be fantastic. So you never know till you get in there, but we believe in paying for the eviction if it were to come to that, and we want to share that. So lastly, we would agree to resell the house for you at no charge if that ever happened, meaning you wouldn't have to concede that first monthly payment again to us. We bring another fully vetted buyer under the same circumstances, same conditions. You reserve those rights. They'd have to meet our down payment requirements, and upon your approval, we would offer you what we call preferred distribution from their down payment. And simply what that means is any expenses they would have, any missed payments, say they had to clean the house, let's say they had to shampoo the carpets or any scenario, we just ask they give us a tally of what they were out money-wise, payments, etc. And when the new buyer comes in after they've approved them, we take in a preferential distribution the money that the sellers owed right from the new buyer's down payment, and they get that right up front at closing, effectively not missing a beat. Now, we're not covering payments in that period. I want to be very clear about that. But we do offer to get them any missed payments back through the next buyer's down payment. So even in a worst case scenario, we're going to try to make sure that they're made whole financially. So those are the objections. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get the objections emailed out to you as well. I don't know if we have any grammatical things. I'm a stickler for grammar. I saw a couple little grammatical things in here, but as a whole, you understand the chronology of the script and some of the key points and the key tidbits. This is being recorded, so if you wanted to watch it over, we certainly could accommodate that. But aside from that, guys, it's exactly what I was hoping to accomplish today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something from it. We're going to start doing these every 2 weeks. Next week, our next training in 2 weeks from today will be on marketing, specifically the Facebook marketing campaign that we've had some preliminary, well, that's not fair. We've had some really good success with it over time, and recently we've had some really good tweaks that Danny's made and have really made the phone ring, and people are writing offers from these ads, so that's really, really exciting. And aside from that, that's kind of what I had here. So before we wrap it up for the day, Michael, anything you want to add?
Nope.
You want to give another weird face peering into the screen here? Who's this weird guy looking over here? Look at the... All right, Danny, you want to come over and say goodbye, hello, and goodbye at the same time?
I'll sign it off.
All these pretty faces around here. I tell you what, though.
That's an actual pretty
That's
face,
pretty
though.
face. This is not a pretty face here. We know better. So, guys, it's always a pleasure doing this. We, you guys are our whole world. You're our purpose for being here every day, and we're excited that you're a part of what we're doing. Got some really exciting things upcoming. We will talk about them as we go, but all of you know we're in process of franchising. We're about 6 to 8 weeks away, pending out no unforeseens, but we'll touch on that when we get a little closer. And we'll have a whole training on what that means for you. It really doesn't mean a big change for your agreements, but we think it's going to be a big change for the value of what you have today. So we'll touch on that as we go. Having said that, you have any other questions after the fact, let us know. Otherwise, it's been a great session. We thank you guys for joining us.